A stanza by stanza analysis of the poem Anthem for Doomed Youth. The poem consists of two stanzas. The first stanza is made up of 8 lines, that is an octave, while the second stanza is made up of 6 lines, that's sextet. So the first stanza identifies the battlefield and the noise of war. The battlefield and the noise of the war. It gives us a picture of what a battlefield looks like and the kind of sounds that come from war. So this first stanza sets the setting. It identifies the setting of this poem and also establishes the tone and the mood of this poem. The poem opens with a rhetorical question: what passing bells for those who die as cattle? What passing bells for those who die as cattle? This rhetorical question is like a note of what righteous anger in the speaker, as it tells us or it shows how soldiers are being dehumanized, and this brings up the imagery of violence and unnecessary slaughter, human beings being slaughtered as cattle. So this line 1 questions what funeral bells exist for soldiers who die like cattle. What kind of funeral bell would be wrong for those soldiers who die like livestock in a battlefield? And the response or the answer is found in line 2. The speaker says the only response is the loud, angry sound of guns. The only response, the funeral bell, the only response is what? The loud, angry sound of guns. Then line 3 to 4 goes further to identify more sounds or noise, or things that produce noise in a battlefield. Rapid gunfire, that is line 3 to 4. Rapid gunfire is also a sound that is produced in a war front, and in this case the rapid gunfire replaces the traditional slow funeral prayer that have been made for the dead. Yes, instead of the slow and traditional funeral prayers, what these soldiers see or what they are being given is what the rapid gunfire. And the conventional religious rituals are replaced by choirs of artillery fire. Yes, if a church or churches have their own traditional way of conducting a funeral ceremony, but for this poet, for the speaker, according to line 5 to 7, the conventional religious rituals, those conventional religious rituals are replaced by the choirs of artillery fire. This also highlights the inhumanity of the war front. Then line 8, the speaker goes further to say mournful bugles sound from the soldiers' homes in England. Another mournful sound. Another sound. This one comes from the distant homes of those soldiers in England. Bugle sounds from the soldiers' homes in England. So all these sounds are the noise. They are noises or they are sounds that are produced that accompany war, or they are produced in a war front. So this first stanza is all about, or it identifies the setting of this poem, which is the battlefield, and different sounds of war. And these sounds, they are used here to replace the normal religious sounds and other sounds that are being peacefully made, or yes, that are being heard when funerals are being conducted for the dead. But for those dead soldiers in our war fronts, as you can see, the kind of sounds being produced in honor of them. Okay, then the stanza 2 tells us about the home, the grief, and the final closure. The memorial, the kind of memorial being given to those soldiers that die as cattle in a battlefield. When they finally die in the battlefield, what happens at home? Because they left their loved ones at home. How are they being grieved? How do the people they left behind grieve for them? And how do they finally brought their memory to an end? That is the final closure. So stanza 2 talks about the home of those dead soldiers, the grief, and the final closure. Then in this second stanza, the speaker moves away from the war to speak about the people who have been affected by it. So the first stanza was all about war, and different sounds are produced in our war fronts. And the second stanza, the setting changes from war front to the home. Yeah, because those soldiers, they came from different homes. So here the speaker talks about the different people who have been affected by the war. Here we have the civilians who mourn their lost brothers, the family members of the deceased who mourn their loved ones. There you have the brothers, the fathers, the grandfather, the uncles, and all of them that patiently waited for the return of their loved ones, but at the end of the day, they got disappointed and miserable when those loved ones couldn't return, when they lost their lives in the battlefield. How those people grieve for them. And here you see the speaker talking about the futility of mourning the dead who have been lost so carelessly. It's not only that they died, but that was a careless death. And here, well, in line 9, the poem questions what lights will honor the dead. The memorials, what kind of light will honor the dead? That's line 9. Then line 10 to 11, the speaker said that instead of religious candles, the true light is the emotional, tearful farewells from loved ones. Instead of what? Religious candles, lighting candles for the dead, the true light is what? The emotional, tearful farewells from the loved ones, the wives, the children, the fathers, the uncles, and all those loved ones, those soldiers left behind. Then in line 12, the pale grieving faces of loved ones replace the traditional funeral clothes. Instead of normal funeral clothes that are being placed on the coffins of the dead, the pale grieving faces of those loved ones replace what? The funeral clothes that should be placed on their coffins. Then line 13, tender lingering memories replace what? Physical funeral flowers. Yeah, instead of dropping flowers on their graves, you see the memories, sweet memories of those soldiers replacing their flowers. And in line 14, this poem closes with words with a symbolic quiet act of mourning. Symbolic quiet act of mourning, which is what? Closing blinds at dusk. As the day comes to as night falls, a blind will be drawn in honor of the dead. This blind can mean a lot of things. It can mean that the history of the person has been brought to an end, and the people can then now move around, going on or going about their own daily activities. This blind is symbolic, and the meaning differs according to different cultures. Drawing down of blind in honor of the dead. It can be the closing of life. The drawing down of the blind can mean the end of end of life, or bringing the history of the person to the end, so that those ones the dead left behind can carry on with their own activities. So, in conclusion, Anthem for Doomed Youth depicts what? The horrorful nature and the useless nature of war, careless death that soldiers experience in the war front. And what this poem, Wilfred Owen advocates that instead of war, instead of countries spending a lot on funding wars, that they should embrace peace. For many lives, many soldiers, many young soldiers lose their lives in the war front, and that careless death does not affect only the soldiers but those ones they left behind, which means that the path of peace should be pursued instead of war.